Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and I am back for my Week 5 LEC overview analysis, and of course, at the end, my updated power rankings. There aren't a lot of games that could top last weekend's amazing stretch of upsets that we got in both Day 1 and Day 2, but this week definitely hopes to offer a few surprises and a few bits of clarity, I think, moving in to some of the final weeks here in the LEC. We're only 3 weeks away from playoffs. So if you guys are excited for this video, please let me know down in the comment section below. Let me know which series or which game you were most excited for going into the week. But without wasting too much time, let's go ahead and jump right into Day 1. And kicking off Day 1 for Week 5 here in the LEC was a matchup between SK Gaming and Team BDS. A lot of people putting these two at the bottom of their power rankings, me included. SK obviously on a little bit of a hot streak right now after a pretty incredible Week 4. They come in here to Week 5, and they continue the streak just a tad here by taking down BDS, who was just completely struggling. The game was pretty easy, I would say, for SK. Honestly, not a lot of resistance put up, so much so that even on an accident, they can make an unbelievable play that basically wins them the game. But let's go ahead and talk about what SK did right first and foremost. My player of the game here is going to go to GenX in the top lane, who continues to be fine for SK. This was probably one of his better games of the split. The Gnar into Sejuani matchup can be relatively easy for the Gnar if the Gnar is better or if the Gnar knows how to play it. Obviously, Sejuani does feel like she can have a little bit of kill pressure, especially pre-6. But once Gnar has the ability to get gank assistance, it's really difficult for the Sejuani to do much, and we really saw that in this matchup. The Gnar was really able to take over a little bit later. Gilius doing a good job of making sure that he was safe early and then just being able to capitalize on that. But also Gilius had other priorities here in the bottom lane as well. GenX just with a really solid game. Obviously, a lot of people are going to remember the penultimate Gnar play here as he goes in right on top of Nuclearant in that final fight and just gets everything off for free. And obviously he has the meme. He goes up into the interview after and he's like, yeah, I just completely misclicked. I went in way too early and it just happened to work out because BDS kind of sucks. And he's right. Like, it clearly was a misclick and BDS does suck. But it's just funny to hear a pro say that. So yeah, I mean, GenX with a good game, even if not all of it was intentional. But I do want to give a big shout out to this bottom lane as well. G2 and Treats, I think, are developing. I think they are creating a little bit more synergy than maybe they had at the beginning of the year. This was a pretty big stomp in the bottom lane here. G2's just a better player than Xmatty by quite a considerable margin, and so it was really easy to see a world in which Treats and G2 could capitalize on that, and they absolutely did. Gilius with a good game. Certus was fine. He didn't have to do much this one, even though he was kind of the carry for this team last week. He was also the one this week that was probably a little bit more muted, so that could be a good sign for SK, but overall, everybody playing pretty well there. For BDS, they just continue to look helpless. They continue to look like they don't really have an avenue. Nuclearant was playing the early game at least okay on a champion where I really don't like the pick here. I really do not like LeBlanc into Gnar, Jarvan, even Renata. I think that can be a pretty difficult ask for a LeBlanc to play. And we definitely saw that. He wasn't doing pretty much any damage. And then he has that like really rough play towards the end of the game where Gnar goes onto him and he doesn't do anything. Chains him and then he just stands there, doesn't auto attack, doesn't do anything. Definitely not the play you want to see from your mid laner. He's had a really bad split here. But my dud of the game here has to go to Xmatty, who just continues to look like an absolute liability for this BDS team. He continues to be, unfortunately, the worst AD carry in Europe. And he continued that here. G2 and Treats were infinitely better than him in a matchup that I think is winnable for the Aphelios. Unfortunately, it just was never going to play out like that. Erdot does not help Xmatty at all. You know, I'm not saying that it's entirely his fault. Erdot also isn't really that good of a support, but at the end of the day, Xmatty has to be better than this, better than getting caught over and over again, and unfortunately, he just hasn't been. So, outlook-wise for these two teams, like BDS, I think will continue to be one of the bottom teams here, if not the bottom team in the LEC, right? Like, for the rest of the split, they just have shown pretty much nothing. Syncroft was at least playing well earlier in the year, but he's almost honestly kind of completely fallen off a cliff in the past 2 weeks. He's looked like one of the worst junglers in the league the last 2 weeks. So if he continues to keep that up, this team really has no hope because Nuclearant, Xmatty, Aggressive Erdot, like they're just not the guys that are going to be able to get you wins. So this team might actually go 1-17, which would be very sad to see, but you know, it might be what's on the cards. As for SK Gaming, they're on a 3-0 win streak right now, which is pretty awesome for them. I don't know how sustainable it is. A lot of their wins were against teams that I think were really struggling outside of them. But obviously, it's really, really good to see them win and to see them kind of get a little bit of confidence here, especially because last week, a lot of that was on Certus in the mid lane, and here we're seeing a little bit more of a team game. I think for SK Gaming, which you're going to be excited about, the fact that they can prove, they have proven that they can win through multiple lanes, at least at some sort of level, is definitely exciting. I'm not convinced that they're even on the level of someone like an Astralis or a Misfits just yet. I'm going to need to see just a tad bit more from them, but beating VDS is definitely a way to start, and definitely a good sign for future things. At least they're not the worst team in the league. Jumping into our second game here of day one, we had Misfits Gaming taking on Excel. And Excel was actually able to pick up a win here after a really rough week 4. Obviously, they were kind of clumped in with a lot of the other teams that were struggling. You know, Fnatic, G2, these top teams that were really losing games for no reason. Excel was definitely one of them last week, but it's good to see them get a bounce-back win in a matchup that they absolutely should be winning here against the Misfits team that, while they are doing well, I just don't know if they have the talent to stack up. And Excel kind of proved that here. This was a little bit of a diffie in the tiffy, if you will. The top lane diff here was pretty strong. Finn had a really phenomenal game on the Gangplank. Want to give him a big shout out to that. He's actually having a really good split, not just as a weak side player, but honestly as a strong side player as well. He's just been very consistent for this Excel team. Him and Nukeduck, I think, have been surprisingly probably the two most promising members of Excel in summer so far. Very exciting. Nukeduck also a phenomenal game here, but player of the game does have to go to Finn on that Gangplank just for the sheer amount of damage that he was doing in this game. Obviously, we've all had the conversation at this point about crit Gangplank versus bruiser Gangplank, and I think in a matchup, especially against Gwen, where you can really, like, punish the Gwen, you go crit, and you obliterate her, and then you can just kind of scale into that late game really seamlessly. It's very good. It's a very good matchup for Gangplank, and I really see why Finn wanted to do it, and he excelled at it here. He was really phenomenal. Big shout out to Nukeduck on the Taliyah. Some really clutch plays from the Taliyah. The Taliyah E was super high value this game, just in general, helping out a lot of the plays that they wanted to make, and then obviously he makes that grand escape over the pit, and he looks like a absolute beast this game. He's looked like a beast all year long. Year of the Duck continues. If we take week 4 out of it, Nukeduck continues to look like one of the more promising mid laners in the region so far this year, which is really great to see. Patrick and Mickey continue to be good. They weren't really the focal point this game. They didn't have to be, and Marcoon is fine. He continues to be one of the more consistent junglers, but really this one was about the solo laners. This was about Finn being awesome on the Gangplank and Nukeduck being really great on the Taliyah. But we can move on to talking about Misfits now and kind of where they went wrong. Honestly, this team has kind of lived or died by its solo lanes all year long. VTO, no doubt, has kind of been the guy for Misfits. I don't need to be the one to tell you that. Obviously, you already know that. But honestly, this top lane position for this team has been very heavily invested in, I think, all year long, whether it be here or whether it be irrelevant here in summer. They do want to put a lot of resources into making sure that lane gets relatively ahead, and it just didn't in this game. There was a really big gap in the top lane. Finn obliterated Irrelevant. Irrelevant's going to get my dud of the game here. He was just not so good in this one. He's actually had some pretty decent performances, especially last week when they were looking really good, but this was not one of them. He was outclassed pretty much at every avenue by Finn, and just didn't overall look very good in this matchup. VTO got outclassed by Nukeduck in this game. There's really no other way to put it. VTO is kind of your carry. If he's not having a good game, Misfits is just simply not going to win. They do not have a backup option. Neon is fine, but he has to get there. His early game is quite weak, and Mersa, I think, contributes a little bit to that. Unfortunately, they were just down too much at this point for Neon to be able to do much, especially on the Xayah, a pick that's just not really conducive in the meta right now to hard carrying. Obviously, Patrick on the Samira, a pick I would probably lump in there as well, but we've seen Samiras globally do a bit more than the Xayah, especially without the Rakan. So, yeah, I think, back and forth, I think there was not really much chance in draft for this to really be a bot-centric focused game, and Irrelevant just lost too hard in the top lane for Misfits to really have a shot at winning this. Outlook-wise, I mean, both teams are fine. Misfits continue to be pretty much exactly where I think they are. They're kind of the gatekeepers of playoffs for me. They're going to be sitting around that 6 or 7 spot. Right now, they could be on the outside looking in. I think Vitality is probably their competition, and Vitality is actually playing really well right now. And so I think Misfits might be on the outside looking in when it comes to playoffs. Obviously, I'm not going to talk a ton about the news that came out a day before this video comes out, which is that Misfits has decided to sell its LEC spot because that was not known as of the time of these games being played. So really, I don't think it's a lot of pertinent information, at least for this week. Maybe we'll talk a bit more about it as the season goes on, but as of this week, I don't think it matters. It looks like they're going to be on the outside looking in, though, in their final split. As for Excel, they should be one of the top teams in the region. This should be one of the top 2, top 3 teams in Europe. They played like it in this game, and I really like that. Obviously, Finn and Nukeduck have been kind of on a roll. Marcoon continues to be one of the more consistent junglers in the league. If he can kind of take that next step up into being one of the more controlling top junglers in the league, Patrick and Mickey, we know, can be one of the best bot lanes in the world. And if that team is clicking, then they're going to be one of the best teams in the region, no doubt. They're still a little bit off of that, so hopefully we can see that come together in the next up and coming weeks. But this is a very good start for them for sure. Next, we move on to a matchup here that was certainly a game between two teams, and I've been waiting to talk about this one all week, but it was a matchup between Mad Lions and Team Vitality. Holy crap, what an absolute demolition as Mad Lions takes this game in 24 minutes. This was a destruction of the bottom lane. Like, this was as not close, as big of an ADC gap as I've ever seen in the LEC. It was really, really that impressive from Mad Lions, who just obliterated Vitality at pretty much every possible angle. Unforgiven was like 8 or 9k gold up at one point in the game. I'm pretty sure he was like 53%, over the next highest in the game, being El Yoya, his teammate. Like, the amount of gold this Draven had was genuinely disgusting. It's one of the highest, like one of the biggest gold differences in the history of League of Legends. Like, genuinely any region that I've ever watched. Like, this is one of the biggest gold differences ever. And it's because Unforgiven and Kaiser just completely steamrolled Carzzy and Labrov. Completely steamrolled. Obviously, this was not the game that you wanted for Vitality, but we talk about Mad Lions here. This was probably the best game that Mad Lions has played, maybe, this year. Like, this was so dominant and so destructive against a team that, honestly, up until this point had been relatively okay. Like, they had been kind of moving along. They were beating the bad teams. They were kind of showing that they were in playoff form. And holy shit, like, they just got their weakest point taken advantage of over and over and over again. Obviously, my player of the game here is going to be Unforgiven. That should shock absolutely no one. Kaiser with a phenomenal game here on the Nautilus as well. El Yoya doing fine on the Poppy. Niski fine on the Taliyah. Armit fine on the Gwen. But really, the story here is Unforgiven on the Draven, who just completely obliterated the game from minute 1. It was over. There was no shot for Carzzy in this game. And it was honestly absolutely insane to watch. Like, it was disgusting. Talk about replacing somebody and then dancing on their grave. Like, this was a very, very scary proposition for Mad Lions. Like I said, pretty much the perfect game here from Unforgiven and Kaiser. You couldn't have asked for anything else, and this is a duo that I think has really carried Mad Lions, especially in spring. They were carrying them a lot. Obviously, Niski and Oyoya, I think, have stepped up a lot more here in summer, but in spring, this was Unforgiven and Kaiser's team. And they could, they showed that at the end of the day, no matter how well Niski plays, no matter how well Oyoya plays, this is still Unforgiven and Kaiser's team at the end of the day, because when they win, and they win hard. And Mad Lions continues to look like one of the most, if not the most consistent teams in the LEC. Obviously, Rogue up until this week, but, we'll get to them later. Overall, just a really good game for Mad Lions. As for Vitality, this is a disaster. Somehow people are going to find a way to blame this on Perks and Alfari. I don't really know how you could do that. People are going to say that Bo would fix all these problems. Don't really know how he would do that. Carzzy and Labrov are a disaster, right? Like, I hear the EU tactical line being spread a lot, and obviously, while I think for a lot of reasons that doesn't make sense, I think, on the surface, I can get the comparison, right? 280 carries that have just completely fallen off a cliff when it comes to 2022. And yes, Carzzy has fallen off a cliff. Like, that I am not disputing, nor am I disputing that tactical fell off a cliff. I think both certainly did. Obviously, I do think they have a little bit of a difference in playstyle, but Carzzy gets obliterated here. Like, this was not even close to being a skill contest. Unforgiven was 10 times the player Carzzy was, unfortunately, on this day. I'm not saying he will always be that, but he certainly was here. Labrov wasn't much better here. It's not that he was really that great, honestly. I blame a lot of this on Carzzy, but Labrov wasn't great here either. And then everybody else was just kind of, at that point, the game was over, right? Like, the game was just so out of hand at that point that there was really nothing Vitality could do. Outlook-wise for these two teams, like this, Vitality's going to be in trouble if this bot lane can't figure it out. Even when they won this year, this bot lane has never looked good. They are one of the worst bot lanes in Europe, and they will continue to be one of the worst bot lanes in Europe. So I think you might actually have to start looking for replacements. I know you might not want to do that because of personalities, but really, I don't know if you can make playoffs with Carzzy and Labrov. I really think they are that much of a hindrance. As for Mad Lions, like, they're looking good. Niski looks like he can actually carry games, and then you get to this point where it's like, okay, Unforgiven, take over, win. Like it's just so simple, right? Like, you have multiple strategies to win. Like, they're not one-trickable, you know, they're not bannable in draft, which I think is huge for this roster, and overall, I just think Mad Lions looks really, really solid right now. In my opinion, one of the top 2 teams in the region. Hopefully they can hold on to that because, you know, talent-wise, maybe they're not there, but just the way they play as a team, they are definitely there. So very, very excited to see what this Mad Lions team can accomplish throughout the rest of the year. Beating Vitality here is ginormous, especially in the way that they did it. Moving on to the 4th game here of day 1. We had a matchup between G2 Esports and Astralis, and holy shit, like, whoo, this was a game. This was certainly one to watch. If you haven't watched it, I'm about to spoil it for you, unfortunately, because I would tell you to go and watch it, but now you're already seeing the G2 wins. You would not have known that for 99% of this game. Astralis losing this is absolutely unbelievable. I don't even know how it was possible, but they sure found a way. Yeah, G2 wins this one. Let's talk about what G2 did right. They played the endgame right. They really didn't mess up. They were super far down in gold for most of this game. They really weren't in a position where they had a lot of opportunities to do well, so they had to try and take their opportunities. They tried to bait Astralis into invading the jungle with no vision, and they did it, and they got some gold from that. And then, once they knew that Astralis was going for that Baron, they made the split-second decision to say, okay, no, we can end the game. And they did. They ended the game, and it was pretty awesome. I'm not sure if that was BB's call himself, but BB did a great job this game of just capitalizing on the small micro and macro mistakes that Astralis was making over and over again. And that was pretty much the reason. Like, those capitalizations were the reason that G2 was able to win this one. Like, they didn't play better. They just thought better. They outplayed him towards the end of the game here. And they were able to pull out the big dub here. They're going to be very happy with that after a disastrous week last week. Coming back and getting a win is going to be great. Broken Blade's going to get my player of the game here. He absolutely deserves it. I'm not sure if he was the one to make all those calls towards the end of the game, but if he was, then he double deserves it because he was the one who won G2 the game. Not because he was great at fighting, but because he was exactly where he needed to be every single second of that game. He was exactly where he needed to be, and he ends up winning the game. For G2, obviously him and Caps, but really Broken Blade, like, was able to take down that Nexus basically by himself on that back door. So very, 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 very good job here by G2. Very good job by Broken Blade. You know, shout out to Caps. I thought he had a really good game here. And shout out to Yankos, who I thought was really doing a lot of good towards the end. Who wasn't doing good for this G2 team was the bottom lane, who continued to definitely be the weak link of this G2 roster. I don't often do this, but my dud of the game is going to go to a player on the winning team. And that's going to go to Flackett here, who just got completely outplayed on Draven pretty much the entire game. He was down in gold, I think, the entire game on Draven, which is just unacceptable against a Jinx. You have to be ahead. Like, that is a matchup that you simply just have to win. And he didn't. He lost it pretty hard. And Targamas wasn't much better on the Tom. Obviously, that's a lane where you have to be super aggressive. Junghoon picks the Braum and just plays super safe, and it really works out for Astralis, as that Jinx really was scary towards the end, and had a Wukong that had a lot of gold on top of her to be able to do a lot of damage. They would have won pretty much any fight 5v5 that they got themselves into. That was fair, and they obviously walk into the enemy jungle and they get blown up after getting 3 dragons basically for free, and then they make the call to go for Baron, and G2 just ends the game. So really not a great look here from Astralis, mostly just because this is 99 teams out of 100 win this game in Astralis' position, and they just make mistake after mistake and throw the game. Obviously, give credit where it's due. G2 did capitalize on those mistakes. There were a lot of teams, especially in the West, that just simply wouldn't have the wherewithal to be like, oh, we can win the game right now. We don't have to care about this Baron. We can trade Baron for Nexus. Like, we don't actually have to care. here. There aren't a lot of teams that would be smart enough to make that decision. Obviously, G2 was one of them here. But for Astralis, like, you just have to play smarter. You just have to be more aware because at the end of the day, like, losing games like this when you absolutely shouldn't, like, these are the games that will knock you out of playoffs. And with playoffs being such a close race right now, obviously, you know, you've got all of these teams, even good teams like Fnatic and G2, sitting basically the exact same record as you, sitting at the 4, 5, 6 spots. Like, you can't afford to make mistakes like this in games against G2. You have to be able to pull these out. And so, definitely going to be a rough loss here for Astralis. Outlook-wise, they are concerning me now. Like, this was a team that I think was really exciting at the beginning of the year because of how well their bottom lane was playing. Kabe and Jonghoon were beating people that they absolutely had no right to beat. And I think in this series, they were in this game, they were better. Like, Kabe and Jonghoon were better than Flacken and Targamas. But unfortunately, the shot calling just wasn't there. Dior continues to be a little bit of an issue for this team. He TPs instead of recalling with Baron at the end there, and he TPs to a tower that just dies pretty much as soon as he starts the TP. If he backs with Baron buff, maybe he has enough time to actually get back there and do something, but, you know, the play, I think, cost him. And then, obviously, the rest of the team just bad macro decisions. Xerxes was ahead and couldn't do anything with it. So, yeah, Astralis, you know, they're a team that I think is probably, obviously, they're a lot better than they were last split, but they're probably going to be on the outside looking in. As for G2, they're going to be very thankful to pull away with this one with the win. They want this to kind of reinvigorate them and kind of get them back on the right track. Hopefully it can, because really, like, they didn't look like the better team for most of this game. So hopefully they can just kind of take the outcome and translate that into the rest of the year rather than how they actually played. That's going to bring us to our 5th and final game here of day 1. And we closed off day 1 with a banger between Fnatic and Rogue. And Rogue is able to take this one off of the play of the jungle mid synergy kind of coming back and being the true core focal point of Rogue all this time. It seems nothing has really changed from Spring after all. They look really, really dominant here, especially Malrang here on the Poppy. Want to give him a big shout out. He was really, really solid here. I think I've kind of undersold the impact that Malrang has had on this Rogue team over the course of this year. He was so important to them in Spring. Probably the most important player on this team in Spring. Obviously, he had his problems in playoffs, but you move back in here to Summer. You have Odo kind of popping off. Comp and Trimby continue to be good. Larson looks like the most consistent mid laner in the region. Like, it's a pretty easy, I think, to forget that Malrang is kind of the backbone of this team, but he really is. Like, and he continues to play like it. He's going to get my player of the game here. I do think it's debatable whether or not he wins that or not, because Larson, I think, played phenomenal this game, but Malrang also had a really, really good game here on the Poppy, just controlling the whole map, really giving pretty much everybody on the team an opportunity to be able to do a lot of damage, whether that be Odo on the Gangplank, whether it be Comp on the Caitlyn, or whether it be Larson on the Azir. And Larson was doing a majority of the damage this game. He was absolutely outplaying Humanoid pretty much the entirety of this game, like actively dominating him. And he looked really, 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 really good on the Azir. His mechanics on the Azir we've always known have been really, really good, but he's really paired up with Malrang really well in order to make a lot of plays now and to keep himself safe. And I think that that's really helping this Rogue team. My biggest concern is that obviously they translate a lot of these skills into playoffs because sometimes they just don't, and we know that they don't. But another good draft here by Freddy. They continue to, in my opinion, be one of the best drafting teams in the world. One of the only teams that I can continuously say win draft over and over and over again. Not that this one was completely extraordinary, but just, you know, another draft where they're given the opportunity to just win the game, and they do so. So, yeah, big credit to Malrang and Larson. Want to give a big shout out to Trimby as well. Those ultimates late game were absolutely devastating. I'm pretty sure towards late game, Humanoid was doing more damage to his own team than he was to the enemy. But moving on to Fnatic, Humanoid continues to be a problem for this team. Like, not just, you know, there are quite a few players on this team that I think have been problems, but Humanoid, I think, in recent weeks has definitely been the biggest one. He just continues to get caught over and over and over again. He's going to get my dud of the game here. Very well deserved. He just continues to not have any sort of pressure from the mid lane. He plays so aggressive. I don't understand the build here. He goes Gale Force on Corki into Poppy. Like, I don't get it. Why are you building another dash as the dash champion into the anti-dash champion? Like, just seems super troll as a build, generally speaking. The rest of the build I think is fine, but I think that one is just really, really questionable. And then Razork I thought was just completely out-jungled by by Malrang this entire game, as Razork has kind of been in a lot of the series here. That jungle mid, I think, if Fnatic really wants to be like a top team in Europe, I'm not sure you can have that jungle mid. Like, I genuinely just don't know if you can have Razork Humanoid here and be one of the better teams in Europe, because right now they're just like, they're game-losing players. I'm not saying that they'll be that the rest of the split, but like, Humanoid single-handedly lost this game. Razork has gotten out jungle by pretty much every top jungler in the region so far this year. It doesn't matter how well Upset does in the late game, which he does. He was trying. He was trying his best here on the Aphelios, but there was just nothing he could do. His own team was blowing him up towards the end of this game. So, yeah, really not a good game for Fnatic. Outlook-wise, they continue to struggle. They're at 500, which is, like, not at all where they want to be at this point in the season. Obviously, this is a team that wants to win LEC. And do I still think they have the talent to do it? Yes, but like I said, they have a pretty gaping hole right now in the jungle and in the mid lane. They're going to have to figure something out. If that's going to be these players turning it around, great. If not, I'm not sure this is a Worlds team. And, like, that's really the concerning part for Fnatic at this point, is they really do have some major issues to work out. Yes, Rogue is a good team, but, like, they should not be getting manhandled like this in the 2v2 matchup like they were. As for Rogue, they continue to be probably the most consistent team in the LEC, at least so far up to this point. A very good win over Fnatic. They moved to 8-2. They're the only team that really doesn't drop games randomly. When they lose, they at least lose to a team that's playing well. They don't just kind of shit the bed for no reason. So, hopefully they can carry that form. Unfortunately, they usually wait until playoffs to do that. Hopefully that's not the Rogue that we're going to get this year. If we're going to get this Rogue showing up at Worlds, I think that would be ideal for LEC fans, to get this version of Rogue all year long, because this is a version of Rogue that I think could genuinely take games off of some of the better Eastern teams in the world right now. So, obviously great game to Malrang, great game to Larson here. Odo, Comp, Trimby, they all did their parts. Rogue continues to look like a unit, and hopefully they can continue to be consistent just throughout the rest of the year. That's going to bring us to day 2 here in week 5 of LEC action. And kicking off day 2, we get a matchup between Astralis and Team BDS that Astralis was able to take pretty cleanly. Very cleanly, actually. Astralis looked like the better team in their matchup earlier this week against G2 and just weren't able to pull out the win. They now get a much easier test in BDS, a team that really can't even beat my Clash team, let alone an actual professional team right now. But yeah, Astralis looking pretty good here. Let's talk about what they did well. Chachi continues to kind of grow. I think he is a top... I ranked him last in my top laner power rankings, and that was mostly because up until that point, he was just kind of getting throttled in lane by pretty much everybody. And I still agree that Chachi's not really that good, but I think he is becoming a little bit of a barometer. If Chachi beats you, like really beats you, like you're not good. And you're not good enough to play right now. And I can put whatever preconceived notion I had for Aggressivu aside going into this split and just say like, yeah, he has not been good. He's just not been good for BDS. Not that it was an environment conducive to winning even if he was good. But, like losing to Chachi this bad is just not acceptable. Chachi's going to get my player of the game here. It was really solid. He continues to look good when he's given opportunities to look good, which he did in this game because Xerxes had a really good one here on the Wukong. Xerxes is another player who I just think if Xerxes is like beating you, you're just not playing well right now. And Syncroft just isn't playing well right now. Obviously, the high prio on the Xin Zhao is just super confusing. It's a champ that I think pretty much in every circle, everybody would agree is like the weak version of a lot of other champs in the meta right now. Even something like a Jarvan, I think probably has a lot more prio than a Xin Zhao, not to mention pretty much any other jungler on the patch, I think, is probably going to look a little bit more cohesive here, but that's fine. A lot of Xin Zhao games will get you that. But Xerxes, yeah, looking fine here. Honestly, just having control over the whole map, really to do whatever he wants. And then Jonghoon with a genuinely phenomenal game here on the Rakan. One of the best games, I think, of Rakan I've seen in quite a while. I'm not sure if he's the shot caller for this team, but he's certainly the one on the front lines making a lot of the decisions in-game, like being the one to initiate a lot of the decisions. And this team is much better for it. He is better than this team. He is better than Astralis. And he shows it pretty much every single week. He is one of the better supports in the LEC. I'm pretty convinced on that now. A really phenomenal game from Jonghoon. as he continues to develop his synergy with Kabe, as they continue to be a pretty strong point of the map here for Astralis. And then Dior gets a signature champion here in Vex. I don't think Vex is all that strong right now, but Dior's really good at her, and the rest of the team was doing well, so it didn't really matter. But moving on to BDS, they just continue to look awful. Aggressivu was really, really bad in this one. He's going to get out of the game. You could give it to Syncroft here on the Xin Zhao because he high-prioed Xin Zhao and then did nothing early game. You give it to Xmatty, who just continues to be the worst AD carry in the region. Like, honestly, this team just doesn't have a lot going for it. For me, it's going to go to Aggressivu because, I mean, getting gapped by Chachi isn't good. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. And, you know, whatever. But, you know, Xmatty continues to look bad. Junghoon just kind of had his number here. Junghoon made some really interesting plays, and Xmatty just wasn't able to keep up. He's not very good. And then, like I said, Xerxes just completely jungling circles around Syncroft. I would have told you that Syncroft was the better jungler going into this game. And I still believe that as a player, you could really make an argument that Syncroft is the better player, but he just looks so completely checked out on this BDS team that is 1-10 now. I really don't see a lot of upside for the rest of this team going forward for the rest of the split. So there's that. Outlook-wise, BDS is the worst team in Europe. They don't really have any sort of upside in them at this point. Like, it's just kind of doomed. Really not much else to talk about. As for Astralis, obviously this is a team that I think is still in striking distance of playoffs. I'm certainly not expecting them to make playoffs because, like I said, they definitely have problems. I still don't think Chachi's that good. I still don't think Xerxes is that good. I still don't think Dior is that good. But Kabe and Junghoon really do make a lot of interesting plays, even against good teams, and they had the game earlier this week against G2. It was really theirs to lose, and unfortunately, they lost it. I think with the win there, we would be looking at this week pretty differently. They'd be sitting above 500 right now. They'd be sitting at 6-5, and I think they'd be positioning themselves in a really, really interesting spot. But at the end of the day, it's not where we're at. They're at 4-5 or 5-6, and they're going to be sitting kind of in this big cluster with a few other teams. Hopefully, they can figure it out. I like this team a lot, especially Junghoon. It would be a little bit of a shame if Junghoon didn't get a lot of the credit he deserved for how well he's playing this year, but overall, I just don't think this team is really going to be making the aspirations of, like, the top 6. There's just too much clutter, and for me, they just don't have the talent to separate themselves outside of that clutter. Moving on to our second game here of Day 2 action. And our second game was a matchup between the Mad Lions and SK Gaming. And Mad Lions was able to take this one off of the back of, I know we just talked about a couple of jungle mid duos, but Elyoya and Niski might be just as good as any of them, as they have a really, really phenomenal game here for Mad Lions. Not the only ones to have a great game. Obviously, we talked about Unforgiven and Kaiser earlier in the week, but this one was definitely a little bit higher up on the totem pole for the jungle and the mid laner, who were really, 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 really great for Mad. I'm going to give player of the game here to Elyoya. He was really, really good. He was impacting just the entire map. This is how you play Trundle. Like, this is, you know, Trundle can be kind of a hit or a miss pick in pro. I think there were a lot of situations in which he's kind of been a little bit useless, and he's been a little bit, he's not been the best pick of all time. I think definitely in certain circumstances here, but you get some matchups here. You get a really tanky team. Honestly, you get the Gnar, you get the Jarvan, you get the Nautilus. You have so many targets to be able to, you know, kind of go in on as that Trundle. And he does a really good job of just affecting the whole map. And he knows that's that's his job this game, is to just pick every single lane off one by one and just make sure that everybody can get a lead. And he does that with the help of, you know, probably the best roaming mid laner in the West here in Niski, who continues to look just as good as he has ever looked. I think in the LEC, in the LCS, whatever you want to say, this is as good as Niski has ever been, in my opinion. He has really, really good synergy with Elyoya. I want to say, I've really been able to notice, but I was actually just kind of informed recently that Mad Lions actually brought on Reignover as a jungle position coach. And I think it has really shown for Elyoya, who has, you know, he was really good last year, but he's taken a step up this year, I think, in terms of consistency. And I think a lot of that has been, there aren't a lot of jungle coaches that are as good at early pathing plans as Reignover. And I think that definitely shows. We've seen him help Blabber a lot in the LCS. And obviously, we've seen what he's done with Elyoya so far this year. Just a really, really good year. And then Niski continues to build upon that. Armet with a good game here in the top lane as well. Not really too impactful until late, but still a good game. And then Unforgiven and Kaiser were fine. Definitely more of a jungle-focused game here for Mad Lions. But as for SK Gaming, they honestly look pretty okay in this game. Going up against a team that I think a lot of people have a lot of high hopes in right now, with how well Matt has been playing over the past, I'd say, like 3 or 4 weeks. It's really easy to kind of get caught up and say, like, oh, SK was just the worst team. And unfortunately, here they were, but they honestly put up a little bit of a fight. Big shout out to Certus, who continues to look really, really good on these more aggressive type of mid laners. They leave him the Silas here, and honestly, he looks really solid. Certus continues to kind of rise on my mid laner ranking list as he shows a lot of potential. He actually shows a lot of interesting things being on a team that I think isn't actually that good around him, and honestly making them look a lot better than they actually are. This game was relatively close for a bit, and I think a lot of that was on the back of Certus. Gilius was one of his better games of the split, even though he couldn't actually keep up with Elyoya in the jungle, who just kind of controlled the map overall. But Gilius was making plays. He was helping Certus kind of get ahead, even if it didn't end up amounting to things. You know, I think he's been playing a lot better as of recently. My dud of the game, unfortunately, is going to go to GenX here in the top lane. Not because GenX necessarily made a ton of mistakes in this one, but more so just he was the least impactful player of SK. I thought everybody here was relatively fine. Jezu really didn't make any mistakes, and Treats really only died when going in. And honestly, they had quite a few catches here with Treats and Certus and Gilius, so really, unfortunately, that just falls on GenX as the unfortunate soul that has to pick up the dud of the game here, just because nobody else played bad, and he just didn't have any great moments here for SK. But overall, I don't think anybody on SK played particularly awful, just kind of an outskilling here from Matt. Elyoya and Niski controlled the whole map, and SK just kind of bled out. As for outlooks of these two teams, SK continues to kind of surprise a lot of people. I mean, they're sitting at 4-7, which is a lot better than I would have expected them to be at this point. I thought they were much closer to BDS than they were to a team like Astralis or a team like Misfits, but clearly I was wrong. This team definitely has a little bit of fight in them. A lot of that is based off of their mid laner. If he can continue to grow and become one of the more interesting mid lane prospects in Europe, I actually think this team could surprise a lot of people. Definitely not playoff surprise people, but, you know, could they take games off of some teams that really aren't expecting it? Yeah, I absolutely think they could do that. I would be very worried if I was Astralis, or if I was Misfits, or if I was Vitality, or one of these teams that are really clawing for one of these playoff spots, and I had to go up against SK, because this is a team that I really do think has the talent to take down those teams on any given day. But for Mad Lions, they continue their stretch here. They look very, very consistent. Obviously, they lost a few games earlier in the year that made me question exactly what this team was, but it looks like they've gotten a little bit on track. They've definitely developed a play style of Elyoya and Niski are just going to be everywhere oftentimes. That is going to impact Unforgiven and just give him the opportunities to carry. But in this one, they didn't actually need him because Elyoya and Niski were able to get everybody ahead. So it's going to be map-focused gameplay for Mad Lions from here on out. We've known that, obviously, all year long. But it is really coming to fruition in games like this. And this is kind of a perfect example of, I think, exactly how this team wants to play from here on out. All right, moving into our third game here of day 2. We had Team Vitality taking on Misfits Gaming. Vitality picks up a really important win here, I think, for their standing in, just in general, their confidence building off of the back of the player who has been dominating for them all year long, just continuing to be their best player, and that's Perks. Perks, like, I have so many people in my player ranking videos that are like, oh my god, how can you put Perks as the third best mid laner in EU over Larson, over Humanoid? And I'm like, I don't know, man. Perks is kind of better than them right now. Maybe not Larson. Obviously, Larson's having a really good year. But Perks has just been phenomenal, right? Like, I trust Perks at a high level. Yes, he makes one play per game that is like, what the hell are you doing? But usually a lot of those plays are from behind, and they are in order to like kind of grab a lead from something that isn't there. You know, I'm not saying that they're advisable, but at least they're understandable. I just think he's such a good player, and he's really, really having a phenomenal year on Vitality. He shows it off in this game, a phenomenal Talia game. He absorbs so much pressure for this team in the mid lane. Pretty much every team just camps him over and over again. I'm not sure why you wouldn't just camp Karzi and Lebrov, who have shown that they just don't have the ability to dodge those ganks. But they camp Perks, because they know if Perks gets behind, this team has absolutely no shot. And it didn't matter in this one. He was just better than VTO. Like, pretty much straight up, he played better than VTO the entire series. Obviously, Talia's a great counter pick into Silas because you can just E. You can just E, and then what does Silas do? He can't dash in on you. So you feel really safe in lane, and then you have a lot of pressure to create plays across the map. And Perks did that. He was really, really phenomenal. Just on, you know, pretty all game long. Like, even when this team was losing, Perks was looking really, really good early in the game. I want to give a shout out here to Carzy. I've been kind of shit-talking him on this channel quite a lot recently, but he had a really good game on Senna here. He was actually really good in the bot lane 2v2. This might be a pick that they go to a little more often, something a little bit more passive where he doesn't really have to get any sort of resources. He can kind of just be on an island and play safe here with Labrov. And you can give Perks kind of this really active pick where he can go and make plays pretty much wherever he wants. And he did that. He picked off Neon a bunch this game on the Taliyah. We'll get to Misfits. They played really bad this game, but we'll get to kind of why exactly Neon was so out of position all game long. But I think a lot of that is due to the fact that the Senna Tahm Kench was really, really safe, and they were kind of letting Neon and Immersa make their own mistakes, and you know, they eventually did. And then shout out to Alphari for just kind of being there in the top lane against the Jax. As for Misfits, this was not a great game from them. Neon was really not good in this one. He's gonna get my dud of the game here. They show a weird lack of understanding of what Taliyah does. For a pick that is so popular right now, it is honestly unbelievable how little this bot lane understood about how Taliyah worked. Neon consistently overpushed on Vision and just gets Taliyah ulted and blocked off and dies over and over again. Mersa trying to make that play in the mid lane. Obviously, he does end up making it. It's Perks' only death of the game when they 3-man mid, but dashing onto the E and then just getting caught under tower, it's like, okay, well, did you forget? Like, I don't know. Like, do you know how the champs work? Like, a really bad game and a weird game for Misfits here that is not enlightening. VTO kind of bully picking the Sylas here while not banning out really any of the counters. Taliyah comes in and really means that he can't do anything all game. And then Schlaton on the Poppy, like, whatever. Jax is a super ego pick in the top lane because you are never going to get side lane pressure in this game against a Taliyah Trundle. Like, you're just simply never going to have the opportunity to side lane. And Jax is just simply not a good pick in team fights. So don't really understand that pick from Irrelevant. Very much feels like an ego pick in general, but certainly in this comp. Like, I just don't get it at all. Outlook-wise, like, this is disappointing for Misfits. 0-2 week from them. They dropped down to 5-6. They're not looking good, man. Like, I don't think this is a team that really looks like they deserve to make playoffs right now. Obviously, they knew probably about the news of the team being sold a little bit earlier than we did, and that could affect team morale. Like, that is kind of a thing that could affect team morale in a negative way. Not exactly sure if that happened this week, but they looked bad this week, and obviously they've made some roster changes moving in to week 6, which we'll get into next week because they didn't happen yet. But, yeah, honestly, this team just did not look good in this week, and they need a pretty major shakeup. As for Vitality, like, this is what you want to see as a bounce back here after pretty much getting obliterated by Mad Lions. Carzy actually had a much better game here. It's really good to see him be able to feel like he has the confidence to bounce back after a really, really rough game 1 here earlier in the week. And then Perks obviously continuing to be this team's hyper carry and being one of the best players in the league so far this year. I think as long as they continue to do that, I think there's a lot of positives that this team can offer you. I just don't know, you know, obviously if they have the talent to do that against some of the better teams. We saw what happened when some of their weaknesses were taken advantage of. So hopefully they can kind of capitalize on the momentum here and limit a lot of the mistakes in draft like they did in this one. Moving on to our 4th game here of Day 2 action. We had a matchup I think a lot of people were really excited to see between Rogue and G2 Esports. G2 actually picking up the win here. Kind of getting back on track. Thank Mr. Astralis. It looks like G2 is fixed because they were really, really good in this one. Happy birthday, Yankos. He gets a birthday wish here, and he gets a birthday win. He's going to be very, very excited about that. He played really, really well in this game. Honestly, I'm never a huge fan of the Xin Zhao pick, but into Volibear, I actually kind of get it. And it worked out really well here. This is exactly what you want to happen. Honestly, a little bit of a, I don't want to say a draft diff, but a poor execution diff when it comes to Rogue, which we'll get to. But a really good game from G2 overall. Honestly, really, the Xin Zhao pick was actually pretty good here. Volibear is a very early game-centric jungler. He really wants to get his lanes ahead early, and Xin Zhao really shut that down. He was able to take a lot of the pressure off of that Volibear and was able to create a lot of it himself. Even if his comp wasn't necessarily designed for that, Caps was having some really good plays here in the mid lane as well. But honestly, big shout out to Broken Blade, who continued to play really well in the top lane on this Gwen. He's kind of been the unsung hero of G2 all year long. I think Yankos has clearly been their best player in 2022, in my opinion. Obviously, Caps has been really good, but Yankos has just been really phenomenal. I think Broken Blade's a very close second. Like, those two, I think, have really been a huge game changer for G2. When they are on, they typically win. When they are off, they typically lose. And in this one, they were on. Jankos played a really good game, like I said. Broken Blade was really, really good on the Gwen here, was just creating a lot of opportunities, not only by himself in the top lane in the Gnar matchup, but also later in the game in these weird side lane matchups and these weird, 1-3-1s or the different 3v3 versus the 2v2 that's happening on the other side of the map that Rogue just can't keep up with. Like, this felt like classic G2. This felt like the kind of macro that they used to play when they would really just suffocate teams out at a global level. So really, really good job here from G2. I think a lot of that has to go to Jankos, but some of it definitely to Broken Blade. And then Caps, I thought, had a really good game here on the Taliyah. But moving on to Rogue, I've been praising their drafts all year long, and I certainly don't think the draft itself is a problem here. I do like the Volibear Kalista combo, especially with Sejuani as the support, because you can really punish the Aphelios early, like a lot. But you know what Malrang doesn't do is anything, and it's really frustrating to watch. I don't understand. We have all these threads talking about how shit of a pick Volibear is, I think, in general. And I really think the only reason that we truly believe that is because of how poorly pros play Volibear. Like, I don't know if I'm the only one that, like, thinks this, but, like, pros do the opposite on Volibear of what they're supposed to do. Volibear is an early game pressure jungler. I think of him very similarly to someone like a Lee Sin. Like, I don't think he fills the exact same role, or a Xin Zhao, right? Like, where at level 4, level 5, like, this dude can trade, and he can come into lanes and be a real problem for especially an Aphelios into a Kalista, which is already going to be a lane where you're struggling a lot in. Once he hits 6, that dive is completely free, even with the Tahm Kench there, because you're going to hit 6 before that Tahm Kench hits 6. And so I don't understand why teams are so hesitant to make plays around this Volibear. Rogue certainly was this game, and Malrang's going to get the dud of the game for it. He picks a pick that really, really needs to get ahead, and a bot lane pick that needs to get ahead, and he just does nothing. Obviously, you're counting a lot on this Azir to be able to carry you into the late game, but Larson gets pulled in 55 different directions by great G2 macro later in the game. And so really, what is the plan here? They don't really have a lot to do, and they're pretty much picked apart over and over and over again. Jankos and whoever is shot calling on G2, honestly, just being better than Malrang. Like, Malrang got completely outclassed in this game, and there's really no other way to put it. Comp and Trimby, I thought, also didn't necessarily play well. Like I said, they really needed to play aggressive early, and they just didn't. They didn't play in that way. Comp definitely getting some kills later in the game in those fights, but by that point, it was too late. Like, G2 had already won this game, and so, honestly, big props to G2. Outlook-wise for Rogue, I think this is a little bit of a rough loss. This is a lot closer to playoff Rogue, and a lot closer to, I think, what people were worried about we were going to see from this team as we got later in the season. They just didn't have the macro to keep up with a team like G2, who were super decisive and very much made decisions, and Rogue just kind of were like, well, I guess we'll lose on both sides of the map, and it just ended up happening. They weren't able to keep up. As for G2, this is phenomenal news. This is one of the best games they've played in summer, if not the best game that they played all of summer. This looked like 2019-2020 G2, where they were just pulling teams in opposite directions, creating pressure not only in the side lanes, but around objectives as well, and forcing the other team to make a decision. And oftentimes those teams are just not going to make the right decisions. That's exactly what G2 used to do, and it created so much pressure on the map for them. They continue to do it in this game. Really, really, really love how they played this. If they can play the rest of the year like this, they're going to skyrocket back to my #1 team in the power rankings, because when they're playing like this, I'm not sure there's any team in Europe that can consistently beat them. That's going to bring us to our 5th and final game here of Day 2, Week 5 LEC action. And it was a good one. It was a matchup between Excel and Fnatic, the British Orgs, going head-to-head, and Excel is able to take this one. Fnatic continuing to free fall down the standings as they are now below 500. They're not 500. They're below 500. And man, they just do not look good. But this is a very good win for Excel. They continue their trend of just being, I don't know, kind of party spoilers, if you will. It seems a lot of their wins have definitely been at times where other teams have just been like, God, not another game. And then they have to play Excel and they get blasted, right? It really was the bot lane stepping up here. There was so much attention thrown on the bot lane in draft. Twitch is gone, Kalista's gone, Lucian's gone, Draven's gone, Zeri's gone. Aphelios is picked away early. Like, there was so much in this game to try to take away Patrick, and they left up as Xayah, which I know Zaya's not great right now, but like, this is Patrick's best champion. And so he just picks it. They pick the Xayah Rakan. They say F it, and they pick the Xayah Rakan. And Patrick wins the game. Like, he has some phenomenal plays here on the Xayah. He's going to get my player of the game here. He was really, really good for Excel, as he's been for a lot of the year, but it was kind of getting a little choppy in the last few weeks. When they were struggling last week, I kind of blamed a lot of it on Patrick and Mickey, mostly because these are the two that are really supposed to be elevating this team to, like, a top 2, top 3 team in the region. They really showed up this week in a matchup that is relatively difficult for the Xayah into the Aphelios Tahm Kench. Patrick was just better. He was just better than Upset. He was better than Hylissang, definitely, who had a rough game here on the Tahm Kench. But him and Mickey were awesome here, and Excel kind of carried that to a win. I want to give a huge shout out to Nuke Duck in the mid lane. Taliyah continues to be a huge problem for a lot of these teams, including Fnatic. Like, every team that kind of plays into Taliyah right now feels unprepared to play into her. These anti-dash champions, Taliyah, Poppy, they're becoming so relevant because teams just do not respect them in-game. I can see why they are so high prio, because at the end of the day, like, yes, you can know you're going into a Poppy. Yes, you can know you're going into a Taliyah. But you have to understand that you have to play differently in the game because of those picks, and it just doesn't seem like a lot of players really respect that. You have to play Vex differently when you know you can't just AFK run it, you know, dash into Taliyah with the ultimate. Like, you just can't do that. Same thing for Tahm Kench. Like, you just can't. Like, there are so many plays that have to be negated here because of Taliyah E, and I just don't think a lot of teams respect that. A very good game from Nuke Duck to help out Patrick and Mickey. Marcoon and Finn continue to be really good. Finn in the top lane continues to do a shit ton of damage on Gangplank. Marcoon continues to help out the entire team here. Excel looked a lot better this week. This very much felt like the Excel that I was hyping up all of the last few weeks. They looked great in this one. As for Fnatic, I mean, they are in complete disaster mode right now. They are below 500. I'm not even sure this team really feels like they're a playoff team right now, let alone a Worlds team. This is a team that wanted to win LEC at the beginning of the split, and I honestly predicted them to. They are not that. Like I said, Razork and Humanoid continue to be problems, but Wunder and Hylissang were not good this game. Like, there's really no other way to put it. Humanoid's going to get my dud of the game because he did literally nothing on the Vex, and obviously he looks completely mental boomed. He looks completely checked out, which is a huge, huge, huge red flag for Fnatic, but Wunder and Hylissang aren't much better here. Wunder had this play where he ults the Xayah right on top of his AD carry later in the game, like near the tier 3, and Patrick just kills Upset. And it's like, okay, Wunder, what did you expect to do with that, Wunder? And then you have Hylissang, who's just, like, running it on Tahm Kench at points. Like, this was not a good game from Fnatic. They were significantly worse here. I know I've been blaming Razork and Humanoid, but it really just isn't them all the time. I think Hylissang is probably having his worst split in a very, very, very long time. He was getting a lot of criticism, rightfully so, at the beginning of the split. I think Humanoid and Razork have kind of taken over that spot a little bit for Fnatic, but let's not forget that Hylissang really has not been that good this split. Wunder has definitely had moments where he's looked a lot better, but he was not so great in this game, and poor Upset just had no chance. Like, absolutely no chance in this one. Even if he played perfect, there was absolutely nothing he was going to do with his team playing like this. So, outlook-wise, like, Fnatic it feels mental boomed right now. They feel completely doomed. You know, I don't know if this is a Worlds team right now. Hell, I don't even know if this is a playoff team right now. They have to get some shit together. Obviously, they have the talent, and they should be able to make playoffs. That, I feel pretty comfortable in saying that if they miss playoffs, it's like a complete disaster, like it's the worst case scenario. I'm not even sure this organization has ever missed playoffs, but, you know, right now, I think their goal has got to just be to make playoffs, and just kind of go from there, because if you're setting the expectation at Worlds right now, you are going to be extremely disappointed. As for Excel, I think you can have Worlds expectations for this team. This was a really good bounce back. Obviously, they had a really rough last week here in week 4, but this is what you want to see from a team that really struggled. Same thing with G2, where, okay, like, we struggled, but we kind of got our mental back together here, and we can dominate one of the teams that I think a lot of people expected us to lose to. G2 did it against Rogue, Excel doing it against Fnatic here. This was a really, really good game. Their bot lane, when they play like this, they feel unstoppable. Nuke Duck continues to be the most surprising player in the LEC with how he's playing, one of the best mids, one of the best players in the LEC. Finn continues to be a super strong force in the top lane, more than weak side, and Marcoon just facilitates it all without ever being an issue for this team. So, yes, I think Excel is very, very, very dangerous, and this is exactly what you wanted to see as a bounce back after that rough week. That is going to do it for my Week 5 LEC overview and analysis of all 10 games across both days here. Up on the screen right now, you're going to see the updated LEC standings. Any ties will just be broken alphabetically. In the first column, you're going to see my power rankings. In the second column, you're going to see how those have changed from last week to this week. We can go over the biggest risers and the biggest followers, and my usual disclaimer for LEC applies. Power rankings mean so little in the LEC compared to every other region because they're really, they fluctuate so much from week to week. The week-to-week variance in how these teams play is genuinely insane. It really is a prediction come playoff time, which one of these teams is actually going to step up and which of these teams is going to inevitably disappoint. But as of right now, this is where I'm looking at. Mad Lions is going to jump up number 1 to number 1 in my power rankings, and they're just the most consistent team in the league right now. Do I think they're the best? I don't know. I really don't know if I think they're the best, but right now they're the most consistent, so they're going to sit there. Excel and G2 both jumping up 2 spots to go to 2 and 3 for me. They have the highest ceilings of any of these two teams right now. Excel can beat anybody in the league. G2, if they're playing like they did against Rogue, can beat anybody in the league. I truly believe that. So for me, they come in higher in the power rankings because I'm expecting a lot out of them come playoff time. That means Rogue, who's been number 1 for only a little bit here, has now dropped down 3 spots to number 4. Their loss this week to G2 really scared me because this is a pattern for them. This isn't some like outlier loss that I can just be like, oh, it was just one loss to G2. This happens every single split to Rogue, and they end up inevitably disappointing in playoffs. I'm really concerned that this is happening again. It was really the manner in which they lost, in which they just didn't play to their comp at all. They got scared as soon as the enemy team really started to make a lot of good plays, and that worries me. So for me, they're going to drop 3 spots down to 4. Fnatic dropping out of the world spots down to 5. Obviously, it's the first time I've had them out of world's contention all year long. They deserve it. They are below 500. Who knows if they even make playoffs right now? I think they will inevitably make playoffs, but I really don't see a world in which these teams' problems are just going to fix themselves overnight. And then everybody else actually sitting still. Vitality's still my final playoff team here at 6. Misfits, Astralis, SK, and BDS in that order after that feel pretty comfortable to me right now. I really don't see any need to shake up that bottom like 5 or so teams. They all feel relatively in the right spot for me, but the top 5 are ever shifting and probably will continue to be ever shifting throughout the rest of the year. But looking at this week, we're going to talk about my player of the week and my dud of the week. My player of the week in week 5 here in the LEC is going to go to Finn on Excel, who was really, really phenomenal. 2 games of Gangplank, 2 games of bow damage. Like, holy crap. Yes, I know building crit hurts, like, especially when you're going into a Gwen. That can really obliterate a lot of that extra survivability that Gwen wants to have. Finn did a great job of managing that. He was great strong side in game 1. He was great weak side in game 2. A really, really good week from Finn. He very much deserves my player of the week. My dud of the week, no surprise here to anybody who watched, is going to go to Humanoid on Fnatic, who continues to be a major issue for this Fnatic roster. They really need to figure out what is going on, because if they continue to play like this, if Humanoid especially continues to play like this Fnatic team is in some major trouble for the outlook of the rest of their season. But that is going to be it. Humanoid, my dud of the week. Finn, my player of the week. If you guys enjoyed, please go ahead and leave a like. It really does mean a lot to the channel. Let me know down in the comment section what your game of the week was, who your player of the week, your dud of the week. What team do you think I'm overrating? What team do you think I'm underrating? I'd love to hear all of that down in the comments section below. But with that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.